In the midst of the absolute depravity and insanity that is Pride Month, I think the single best book that any Christian could read right now is Gay Girl, Good God by Jackie Hill Perry. I picked this book up recently. I had seen it for a couple years and honestly had never really looked into it because I wasn't sure kind of how it was going to be. And I was just like, I don't care. At this point now, having 5 kids, I just had my 5th child, and the absolute just moral depravity that is our current culture, I was like, I can no longer avoid this. I have to have better answers. I have to have a better understanding of this whole sexuality topic and how it ties into a biblical understanding of humanity and all this. Like, I just need more. So I picked up this book, and holy crap, it wrecked me. You guys, it absolutely wrecked me. This book is the story of Jackie experiencing a whole bunch of sexual abuse early on in her childhood and learning very, very horrifically that men are not safe, and then having a budding homosexual attraction coming up in her life, and then living her life as a homosexual for several years before God got a hold of her one night and just completely wrecked her whole entire life. He basically came in and was like, hey, you say you love me, you say that you're following me, but you are choosing to place other loves above me and what I say. And so you can no longer do that if you're going to follow me with all of your heart. And I love the line that she said she heard so clearly that God said, you have to believe my word is true, even if it contradicts how you feel. And so she goes on this whole journey of walking through having homosexual desires and then submitting those to the love of Christ and letting the love that she has and the love relationship with Christ be greater than the love for another woman that she has. In this book, she approaches the whole topic in this understanding of loves and submitting our loves to a higher love, but more importantly, not even submitting it, but like letting go to and being able to experience a higher love and a greater love from Christ himself to us. And the distinction that she makes that I love so much is she's just like, at the same time, while our sexuality is this different thing and kind of this different beast and this kind of special thing, it's actually no different than anything else in our life. It's no different than any other love that we have and any other vice or any other thing that we have. Our calling as Christians and as people who are following Jesus is to submit all of those loves to him. But it's not a, oh, this is terrible and I hate this submission and like, oh yes, I guess I'll give it all to you. It's literally a experiencing his love that's so much greater than any of these other things. And then out of that love and out of the outflow of it and out of a willing heart, setting aside those lesser loves and choosing to submit them to him if they don't align with what his word says. I love how Jackie talks about, she said, I'd met so many disciples who preached more of sin than joy, whose eyes were stuck in a constant state of solemnness, clenched teeth, and an endless fascination with holiness. Why hadn't they ever mentioned the place happiness had within righteousness? Or how the taking up the cross would be a practice in obtaining delight in all that God is. Even the Savior had this kind of joy in mind when he endured the cross. So why hadn't they set their focus on the same? They were not to blame for my unbelief. I just wonder if they had told me about the beauty of God just as much, if not more, as they told me about the horridness of hell, if I would have burned my idols at a faster pace. And this is the whole kind of core of this book, is what changed this woman and what is still constantly changing her is the gospel. And the gospel is about the love of God for you. And it is greater than any other love that you have. And it doesn't matter if that love is your love of food or your love of cursing or your love of someone of the same gender or your love of someone of a different gender and all the terrible wacko ways that can go wrong, right? All of those things are temporal and all of them are lesser loves compared to the love of Christ for you. And if you're going to walk in that, if you're going to be submitted to that, you have to eventually come to the point where you deal with, am I going to let these lesser loves be higher than what is the greatest love? And if they continually are, then this is not the greatest love, and I'm not walking in the fullness of what I can walk in my relationship with Christ. And I loved the way that this woman talked about this. The compassion and the understanding as someone who has lived in this lifestyle for so long was just mind-boggling to me. And I feel like she dealt with it in such a delicate and understanding, but truthful and direct way. I literally was just blown away by this book. But the biggest thing that I took away from this book is not anything to do with homosexuality, because that's not something I've ever struggled with. This is partly why I wanted to read this book. It's like, I just don't understand. Like, I don't understand it. I have no concept, no frame of reference, and I want to understand more, right? So this is why I picked up this book. But I came away from it convicted of so many other things, because the way that Jackie talks about this is like, it's not setting homosexuality or any kind of sexual sin up on this pedestal above everything else. She talks about this point where she realized that she had kind of fallen into the same trap as all these self-righteous people who she used to condemn in the church. And what she said was this quote. She said, "Allowing my sexuality to rule me was a death sentence, but so was everything else." Unbeknownst to me, I had been swayed by the same leaven of thinking that she being this self-righteous thing, right? If only I could just be straight, lay aside my homosexuality, God would accept me and call me his own, I used to think. This delusion was the belief that only one aspect of my life was worthy of judgment while the rest deserved heaven. That my other vices were not as bad. They were just struggles that I had to work on instead of repenting of. And oh my gosh, did this just floor me. Like, we sit here and we make this one sin that we have, or this one sin that we deal with, and really what it is, and the framework that she uses is this one lesser love that we have that we just refuse to let go of. We make that the main point and the only point. And we're just like, oh yeah, I mean, other than that, like other than this one thing, like all this other stuff, like God doesn't care about. God only cares if I'm straight, or God only cares if I stop cursing, or God only cares if I do this and whatever. But everything else like is good, like it's fine. Everything else is fine, right? And we build this lie in our minds that like, oh, I'm good except for this one thing. And so we make our whole focus on this one thing, but then we make all these excuses for the one thing. And we're like, oh, it's just how I am. And she talks about that. She's like, it's just, like I'm just attracted to women. That is what it is. Like, what do you want to do about it? Right. And she just comes in so hard with this understanding of like, dude, everything else is lesser loves. And at the end of the day, the message of the gospel is you are completely and utterly incapable of saving yourself, period. All aspects and all areas, and the only thing that saves you is Christ's love for you and his sacrifice for you, and that covers everything, because everything else is not good enough. All of your best efforts are dirty rags, and it doesn't matter what your best efforts are if they got you to stop drinking or stop smoking or stop swearing or stop being homosexual or stop being whatever. It doesn't matter. Your best efforts can't do anything for you. And I adored how this woman talked through this message in this book, and this truth and beauty with which she shares this idea that everything else is a lesser love. And until you submit all those lesser loves to the greater love from Christ, he will not stop just digging at it and just digging at it, because he has to be the supreme love in your life, and he will not let it go. And our problem is that we make these things to be simultaneously the same as everything else and simultaneously different than everything else. And we're just like, whatever is the easy excuse that makes it to where we're just like, oh, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about my cursing. Cursing is an easy one for me because I still curse. And, it's like, oh, that's fine. Or we're like, oh, this is so bad. Jesus won't accept me because I cursed. Oh my God. And it's like, dude, no. It's not how it works. Sin is sin is sin is sin is sin. Lesser love is lesser love, period. There is only one higher love. That is the love from God, period. That's it. Everything else is lesser. If you do not submit everything else to that higher love, that's sin, period. And it doesn't matter what it is, and you can't get around it. And so I just cannot recommend this book enough, you guys. I think, again, the grace, the beauty, the truth, the honesty, and the understanding as not someone preaching it at you who's never struggled with this in their whole life and who doesn't like have any kind of concept of like having a real sense of empathy or sympathy for it, because it's just so foreign. Like, it's hard for me to talk to anybody about it because I don't know, I don't understand, right? And there's a legitimate sense of frustration from people when somebody's trying to tell you something and they just have no concept for it, right? So I love that this is something that this woman has worked through actively and still is working through. And the last piece that I actually want to mention on this is she talks about the heterosexual gospel. And she says the biggest problem that we have created as Christians talking through this whole homosexual, any kind of the other sexuals, all the pride things, anything with all the sexuality, right? The biggest problem is that we have preached a heterosexual gospel, and we've preached that the gospel is that if you come to Jesus, he'll make you straight and you can marry somebody and you will lose all of your longings for anything that is not right sexually, right? And she's like, that's not the gospel. The gospel is you're a sinner, Christ came, took your place, and died for you. That's the actual gospel. It doesn't have to do with marriage. It doesn't have to do with being heterosexual. It doesn't have to do with any of these things. It literally has to do with you are a sinner. Christ came and died for you. If you accept that, he will give you his life, right? And you can have eternal life through him. That is the actual gospel. And what we have done, she said, many have forgotten that the gospel is actually about God in the first place. When the Christian life has become a practice in doing everything else but making Jesus known, what will we expect of our gospel presentations? They will naturally result in the telling of something empty and void of power, more moral than anything, and sufficient to make men and women believe that they can be saved by and for some other means than Jesus. We sit here and we think that, oh, if only I was straight, then that would get me into heaven. Because all my other things don't really matter. They're all like, I'm a good person. I'm a good person otherwise. If only I could stop cussing. I'm a good person otherwise. I got all my stuff together otherwise. And it just perpetuates this lie that we can be saved by and for some other means than Jesus. And there is no other means. He is the highest love. Everything else is lesser love. Period. End of story. That's the way that he made it work. Right? So again, this book, I think, is just essential in the absolute insanity of culture in 2024 and so timely in the month of the devil. And yeah, sorry, I'm probably going to piss some people off, but is what it is. Read it, please. You'll be better off for it.